Well, today's the day, folks. Today's the day, January the 4th, 2021, where the top paid CEOs in Canada have made already this year as much as the average worker would make in an entire year. Something's a little bit wrong here, obviously. In the United States, that point in time was actually even earlier. I think it was on the 2nd. And for Jeff Bezos, let's see here, he makes $2,489 per second. So that'd be about a minute, less than a minute after midnight, he had as much money made as the average worker. As compared to his average employee, it's even less than that. Wealth inequality has become a pretty big concern of late. As of the 1970s, wealth inequality was not quite as bad as this, but then there was a change. The average productivity of the economy kept going up. The average worker was working more and more hours, but average pay didn't really rise past that point. But the pay of the executives, of the elites, just kept going up and up and up, and the investment class, the capitalist class, just kept making more and more and more money. How did this happen? Well, at about that time, there was a shift to what's called trickle-down economics. The premise behind this is fairly simple and on the surface relatively rational. If you remove taxes and remove restrictions on the wealthiest, well, they'll invest that money in their businesses, which employs the lower classes and allows all boats to rise on this tide. But it turns out it doesn't really work that way. Yeah, when you give rich people money, they don't necessarily invest it in their businesses. They don't necessarily spend it. They mostly hoard it. And so we've seen this massive concentration of wealth up to the wealthiest, 1% of people, whereas the rest of us have been losing that share of wealth. The 10 wealthiest people in the world's combined wealth is $8 trillion. And that's more than the total wealth of many countries. And in fact, it's greater than the total wealth of the lowest 50% of all people on Earth put together. Something about this strikes me as wrong. Now you might say something like, "You're just jealous of their success." But no, really I'm not. I don't need 6 yachts that nest. I don't need a mansion of that size. I don't need any of the things that most of those extremely wealthy people do. My desires are pretty conservative, all things considered. Wouldn't mind a house and a yard and enough money to pay for food and, a couple of creature comforts now and again. Just a happy life. And I think that's most people. Some people probably have some dreams of extreme wealth, but most people are pretty happy just being content, just having enough money to get by. And really, these wealthy people, they do have the power. They could choose to eliminate wealth inequality if they wanted to. Jeff Bezos specifically could pay his workers better so that they didn't have to use food stamps to survive. They wouldn't have to rely on government services to supplement their resources. And our governments could even intervene. They could be, taxing the wealthy more. Taxation represents the mechanism by which money is circulated in our current economy. Based on modern economic theory, the function of taxation is to ensure that the money doesn't pool in the wealthiest, and that it does indeed circulate back around to the rest of us so that the economy continues to operate effectively. And this can take the form of either direct wealth transfer, as in supplements for the poor, as in a basic income, or welfare payments for those who can't work or don't have a job. But most often this involves investment in social infrastructure. such as schools, such as roads, such as the infrastructure of a healthy society that encourages people to become healthy individuals so that you can innovate, so that you can become productive members of society. But with this model of trickle-down economics, that doesn't really happen. The taxation for the wealthy has been pretty well eliminated. Amazon doesn't pay taxes. They've found enough loopholes and done enough lobbying that they don't have to pay any federal tax to the United States, and much the same the case in other nations as well, and with a lot of other wealthy corporations and individuals. Without this taxation mechanism operating, the public purse ends up starved. We can't pay for schools, we can't pay for roads, and the cost of these things end up getting offloaded onto the individual. So rather than it being that our society is taken care of by our governments and by those of us who are best off, we at the bottom of the ladder end up having to fend for ourselves. This is not the foundation of an effective society. And what's worse is that by its own logic, this is bad for capitalism. Unless money is moving, unless there is the resources of the masses to be able to buy things and stimulate economic growth, money can't grow. Sure, the investment class can continue to invest basically imaginary money and make imaginary profits, but the base of the economy is production. And unless there's production, and unless there's a need for production, i.e. a demand for production, i.e. people who can demand production, everything grinds to a halt. The financial crisis of 2008 was apparently caused by some failed mortgages, bad mortgage products, but there is some evidence to suggest it was actually a product of this inequality, of the stagnation of wealth. Since the wealth was being accumulated by fewer and fewer hands, and since there was not enough money for those at the bottom to be able to afford things, there was a debt crisis. There was a liquidity crisis. There was just literally not enough money to go around. It was at least temporarily solved by printing a lot more money and throwing it into the void, and the same sort of thing happened during the early days of the pandemic when things started to grind to a halt. But this is going to reoccur. It's an inevitable outcome of this concentration of wealth. So even if we were pro-capitalist, even if we did desire for the capitalist machine to continue to operate, which I do not, we would need to solve this inequality issue. But, of course, the people with all the money have all the political influence, so there's very little real power that the democratic mechanisms can actually affect on this system. Unless we seize power back from these automated runaway systems and these extremely wealthy people, this process of wealth inequality is going to continue to intensify to the extent where we'll move back into a feudalist style of social organization, and arguably we're already there. Now, I don't have all the answers here. I don't know how we can seize back political power from the runaway systems and wealthy elites, but there's got to be some way, whether it be a torch-carrying mob or a political popular uprising or anything else like that. Maybe you've got some ideas. I'd appreciate the input. I've got more to say on this topic, but this video is long enough as it is. See you tomorrow!